course, someone's not
Hello,
listening.
welcome to Chapter 3 Podcast, the show for readers of science fiction, fantasy, and romance. This is Season 2, Episode 24. We are so excited today to have best-selling romance author Sarah Maclean joining us to talk about her most recent book release, Heartbreaker. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to have
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I think it'll be really fun. I don't know if people don't know, Sarah writes amazing, fun historical romances, which we're going to talk about, and also has a really great podcast. If you don't already listen to it, you should. And we'll have all of that linked in the show notes or video description on YouTube if you're watching us there. And I don't know, Izzy, do you want to start? I know we have a list of questions. We have a list of questions
Sure,
for you.
I apologize for any mowing in the background because, of course,
somebody's
now is
when
someone starts. Yeah, of course.
Always
That's how that always happens. Yeah, we'll dive right into our big list of questions we've got for you. I think the first thing would be to tell people what they can expect from Heartbreaker, and kind of writing this Hell's Bells series.
Yeah. Well, Heartbreaker is the second in my Hell's Bells series, which is it follows a Victorian era girl gang. When I conceived of it, it was partially historically accurate. There is a kind of real deal girl gang that existed in Victorian England, and I was fascinated by them. And then partially like a question that had lived in my mind for a while, which was like, what do superheroes look like in Victorian England, like without superpowers? I mean, do they have superpowers? Sort of. Anger is their superpower, maybe.
That's a good one.
Feels accurate.
And so I sort of took, I don't know, the Marvel universe and then these like real Victorian era like lady criminals and mashed them together and got Hell's Bells. So the first book, which was Bombshelling, came out last year. The conceit was that there would be, 4 driving heroines, like 4 original Bells. And each one had a very particular set of skills, right? Like, so if you've ever seen, any heist movie, there's when they bring together the gang, there's like, everybody has a particular skill set that is necessary in order to pull off a heist. And so Cecily, who is the heroine of Bombshell, which came out last year, is a femme fatale, really misjudged because of the way she looks and acts and able to manipulate men in a very particular kind of way. Adelaide, who is the heroine of Heartbreaker, is a professional thief and was the greatest, was raised by thieves, was a child thief, continues to be a thief. Imogen, who is the heroine of the next book, is an explosives expert and also just pure chaos. And then there's Duchess, who is the kind of one that always has the plan. Loves it when a plan comes together, for those of you who have ever seen the A-Team. And so I did a lot of I watched a bunch of heist movies. I watched a bunch of gang movies. And I was like, how do I just write the most kind of balls to the wall, fun action romance that I can write while trapped inside my house during a pandemic? And so Hell's Bells happened because it was my fantasy world, and now Heartbreaker is here. And it's when you're writing a series, the first book is always the one where you set everything up. So you spend a lot of time worrying as a writer, is this going to be too world buildy? Is there going to be too much information in this book about how the world works? The second book is always really fun because you get to sort of knock down all the walls that you've built and then show how the world expands. So this is a road trip romance. It's actually a quest romance. They are on the Adelaide and a very stern Duke who can't stop noticing her are racing to Scotland. And you get to meet lots of other Bells along the way and see how big the network of these women is.
It's so fun. I think both of us are about halfway through Heartbreaker right now, and it's been a lot of fun to read.
I'm living for the chase part of it because I'm this is just so different than most historicals I picked up lately, and I was just oh, it's so fun just to be we're on the run. Yeah. And then when we meet the Belle in the when the Duke of Claiborne Rex's stuff in the little like pit in the ground. I was like, yes. I was like,
yeah,
look
yeah.
at this network. We have like Lady Robin Hood here, just ready to take from the rich.
She's very fun. There are a number of scenes with Lucia that are like on the cutting room floor because I had so much fun with her. She's also in like a polyamorous relationship, and so it's like it's a very fun like she's very fun and has a lot to say. And she actually got cut out of the book. A lot of her got cut out of the book because it was like didn't serve the
maybe she deserves her own novella.
Maybe okay. I think we need
a lot of demand for her novella already.
Listen, I know we're all demanding the third book. Also, like since book one, we're already like
need to cool it.
You can wait.
We also need this novella.
Yeah. So one question we had is, while writing Heartbreaker, was there anything, and you in your response kind of already a little bit touched on this, but anything specific you were watching or listening to that kind of inspired what you were writing for this book?
That's a good question. I have a playlist that's on Spotify and Apple Music. You can find, if you follow me on Instagram, there are links and everything there. But and that playlist is very much like girl gang anthems. So that's always a really fun way of doing it. When I originally started designing the bells, I was watching a ton, like I said, of heist movies where large groups of people had to work together to like achieve a goal. It will surprise absolutely no one that I have watched Peaky Blinders like 14 times.
Fair.
I mean, it's just all there in the text. Like once I say that out loud in a room full of people, they're like, oh yeah, that all checks out. That's obvious. Heartbreaker though, because it's a quest, I spent a lot of time reading, road trip books, like reading books where people were moving across, large swaths of land. So people who I think write great road trips, like Thea Harrison's Dragonbound series begins with like what I think is one of the greatest road trips ever. Milla Vane's The Heart of Blood and Ashes is a quest. Beverly Jenkins has like a magnificent road trip romance across the American West. Like there are some really fantastic existing road trip / Joanna Shoop's Tycoon, which is on a train. Like there are all these like really fabulous. That one probably inspired me the most, that Joanna Shoop book, because one of the challenges when you're writing a road trip is like keeping the characters. So obviously, there are obvious ways that you keep the characters together, but there are lots of other things that can happen over the course of a road trip that can separate them. And that Joanna book is so great because it's a novella and it's terrific. And they're literally trapped in a train car from New York City to St. Louis during the Gilded Age. Wow. So it's, 3 days on a train car. And it's just the two of them alone for 3 days. And it's great because I've discovered over the course of this book that what I really wanted to write was like two people in forced proximity out of water, out of like their comfort zones. Mm-hmm. And which is what a road trip always does, right? It pulls the characters out of their comfort zone. They get to be someone else while they're traveling. And in this particular case, like I really wanted to play with the idea of like, how can I make this keep them on the page together as much as possible? And what was fun about that was like literally cutting out anything where they weren't together, which is what I tried to do with this book, is like, because I always sort of set myself like a writing goal while I'm writing. And in this one, it was like, how can I like really carve out every space where they are not together? Like, so you'll find there's almost no, once the road trip is on, there's almost no period of time in this book where they are separated. And they're separated off page, but like you only see them together. And that was really fun to write.
I mean, their dynamic is fun. Like I'm constantly giggling at like they're just.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah. So like I don't know what to do. I like you. And she's like, I don't know. She's like, no, we can't do this.
There's a woman, B, and her books on Twitter. You all must know her. Yeah. And she's amazing. And she tweeted yesterday, "Frustrated man is my favorite flavor."
Exactly. I was just like, oh.
That's an accurate
That's
description
accurate,
of
very
Claiborne.
accurate.
Just-
Yeah,
Yes.
I was like, he's just so, he doesn't even know how to handle it, just grunting and just at things, and like, she's just like, what is your problem?
Yep.
You already kind of touched on the elephant gangs some,
Mhm.
but what other kind of research did you do to prep for Hell's Bells and Heartbreaker?
Well,
for the
like I
time
said, the
period?
40 Elephants,
Or-
which is the
yeah.
gang, the girl gang that it's based on, it was the largest shoplifting ring in the history of the United Kingdom. It was entirely people by women, and it was basically a bunch of women who realized that in the Victorian era, the sort of perception of women as soft and gentle and like very, very fragile was a great thing to be able to manipulate. In order to get what you want as a woman, which is interesting because, like, of course, we have all kind of grown up in this. Like, women learn, not to speak too broadly, obviously, this is going to be a very broad statement, but like many, many, many women like learn to survive through manipulation. And I don't mean that in like a negative way. I mean, like, they literally learn how they have to like finesse the world around them without like actively, like, many, many women struggle with like being able to immediately like say and do what they want in order to achieve what they need to survive. Instead, they have to learn how to like finagle themselves through the world in order to get what they need to survive, right? And a good example of this is like how, when you're a woman who, is not with a man at a car, like at a mechanic, right? Like, so many times I have like played the like, I'm a dumb baby and can you explain to me how like gas works, to like figure out, to like get this person to like give
100% have done this.
Want, right? And I hate myself. Like, I leave afterward and I'm just like, I hate that that's the way the world is, but like it just is, right? And so these women discovered that like if you manipulate the perception of women as being fragile and like hysterical and needing special treatment, you can absolutely steal tens of thousands of dollars worth of goods from Harrods, and so
it makes sense though, because they would be like, oh, you're not smart enough to do this.
I mean, it's so smart. Yeah.
And so like they would create these like elaborate gowns, right, where there were cages built. They would build cages into their gowns, the skirts of their gowns. Now think about Victorian skirts, right? Like, they're massive. They have those huge bustles, like huge skirts. And then they would create these like enormous pockets, like, thanks, it has pockets, right, inside the folds of the dress. And they would walk through a department store. And this is the golden age. Lisa Kleypas fans will know this. This is like the golden age of department stores, right? Like this is when they were invented. And they would like pick up leather goods or like furs, jewelry, like cosmetics, and they would just shove them into these massive pockets and fill the cages underneath their skirts with them, and then walk out the side door to the department store and then offload all of their stuff to like a battalion of other elephants, right? 40 elephants, who would then like disappear into the crowd. Like, this one with a fur hat, this one with a stole, this one with, a perfume bottle.
Wild.
And then, so by the time the police came, because the police were called by the department store, by the time the police like grabbed the woman with the cage, stuff was all gone. And then she would she would like have a hysterical like outburst and like faint. And then it was like, oh, well, she's fine. Like, we were wrong. Take care of her. Like, she's so fragile, right? But these women were amazing. The women the original queen of the 40 elephants, whose name was Alice Diamond, or she wasn't the original queen, but she was like the one who dominated for the longest time. And she was ultimately arrested and jailed for falsifying papers to work in a munitions factory, because she was going to take the bomb. She was going to like steal munitions and blow something up. So we don't know what, but I have my ideas. So like, and then the 40 elephants lasted until the 1960s. The queen changed every time a queen died or retired. A new queen was named, and the final queen of the 40 elephants was buried in a $6,000 dress that they had stolen from Harrods.
I didn't realize it lasted that long.
Mm-hmm. I know, it's wild, right? There's a book, it's called Alice Diamond and the 40 Elephants.
Mm-hmm.
And it's written by a guy named Brian McDonald. And his grandmother was the final queen of the elephants.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I need to go read
it's
this.
really, really cool.
This is the thing, is I think history, actual history, has so many unexpected things that I think is really cool.
I've said that so many times. You know, I get a lot of email and messages from readers and, you know, reviews and stuff on, you know, online that say like, you know, Maclean's books are fine, but like none of this is historically accurate. Like she's really just writing fantasy. And like, one, I am writing fantasy, right? Like that's what historical romance kind of is.
Yeah.
Because I do take out a lot of the like terrible stuff. Like I don't want to have to do that, and you shouldn't have to read it if you don't want to read it, and that's not what romance is for. That said, I've literally never had an idea for a plot or a character or a, you know, even just like a moment in a book that I couldn't find evidence happening of, you know, that it happened or that it could have happened.
Yeah.
And I think the way we perceive the world from, you know, the 19th century world, which isn't that long ago, first of all, but the way that we perceive the 19th century, and particularly the way we perceive people whose rights were infringed heavily in the 19th century, is really nonsense. Because like it's just there were people working for suffrage, for abolition, for social justice, for, you know, queer rights, there were people constantly fighting. And so when we say like, okay, well, the lion's share weren't, first of all, it doesn't mean that the lion's share of people weren't thinking about social justice, but also we write about exceptional people. That's our job.
Yeah. And all those people have existed.
Yeah.
Throughout history.
I always love that. Like, this couldn't have happened. And it's like,
well,
but it probably could have.
Yeah. 100%. So how has it been moving time periods from like Regency to more Victorian? Has that been interesting?
Yeah, I started with Regency 16 books ago. And it's actually not that difficult for me because I write in one universe. So the time just marches, right? Like, so time moves forward in the Macleaniverse in the same way that it moves forward in time, in like actual real time.
Okay.
So the change in what's really fascinating though is like me, Sarah, my interest in writing, like the things I want to write now are so much better suited for Victorian than they are for Regency. That it sort of just all worked out perfectly. That like I had started moving forward. I never had to change. I never had to like tweak the dates or like make a big time jump. All the characters are still alive. They're all, you know, they're all different ages now in the universe. But also like it really worked out so well that Victoria ascended to the throne in like during the time frame of Daring and the Duke, and like Bombshell started like with her barely on the throne, and it just Hell's Bells coinciding with like Victoria as queen and the way men just like lost their fucking minds when there was a queen is really perfect. Like historically it just all just works out great. Sometimes things just work out. So Victorian just makes it you know, there's a lot more. The Regency was actually much freer for women specifically, and I think like it was a time when people worried, when, you know, like people of a certain ilk, just like privileged people just worried less. But Victorian era, with like the rise of technology and the rise of industry and the rise of proletariat, right? Like a working class, like an actual functioning working class that was able to gain power and money and status in a different way than like birth started really happening right around the sort of early Victorian era. And that's what I am no longer really that interested in the aristocracy. Like, I'm much more interested in the people who build the society rather than the people who like live at the top of it. And so it's logical for me, I think, I'm very comfortable writing here.
That makes sense.
That's a good question.
Yeah. I wonder how do you, I'm just curious with that. How do you, is there a way you keep track of all the different characters in that universe and like what ages or parts of life they would be in at that different points?
Do you have like the board with the line?
No. I don't. And sometimes I get really stuck. And
There's
then
a girl on TikTok. Have you seen her reading all your books?
Amazing.
And her, I was like,
fruit basket.
Wow.
I was
doing
just like,
a lot
oh
of
my
work.
goodness. Like when she came across my For You page, I was like, I'm in love with you right now.
She's doing this like she has like a Maclean, what she calls the Maclean murder wall, and she's printed out in color all the covers of my books, and she's taped them up on her wall. And there's yarn like indicating all the connections that she's done a full reread. You guys, it's magnificent.
That's amazing.
And there are all these like lines, which is like, you know, this character was at the house in this book like 15 books ago, and like, and it's like, that's all true, but also like seeing her map it out, I'm like, oh gosh, yeah, I did do that thing. My problem is often that I like don't think too hard about like the world is so clear to me, like the structure of it. Like when I need a casino, I wrote a casino. That's the casino everybody goes to, right? Like I need a bordello, like I need a lady bordello. I've written one, like that's where those ladies go. And so there's, you know, that's very easy for me. Time is not, I don't have a good timeline. I really should. I should paint it on my wall. And so I do I have a copy of every book that's by my desk, and like, I don't reread ever. I've never reread a full book, but every once in a while I think to myself like, oh, who was that guy? Or like, where was that place? And yeah, but sometimes I'll like, for example, in The Rogue Not Taken, part of the hero's like past wound, like his trauma is like, there was a woman who like kind of manipulated, like she and her father like manipulated his family, and she was this particular name, I can't even remember what her name was. And then in Bombshell, I had to like name all the children of Cecily's sisters, and that heroine, the heroine from The Rogue Not Taken, was one of Cecily's sisters. Now this is like 6 books earlier, right? Like it's like a long time has passed. I no longer have all that information in my head. So I'm like, okay, so I sit down and I figure out how old all the children are, and like who has what children and when they had to be born, and all in order to fit into like the timeline of all of these books, these 6 books that I've written since. And I name them, just whatever names, right? And then I got an email from a reader right after Bombshell came out that was like, I don't understand why King and Sophie, the hero and heroine of The Rogue Not Taken, would name their first daughter the same name as like that woman who had manipulated his whole family. And shit.
No.
And I was like, neither do I.
They just wanted to pay homage to the.
Oh my God.
Theyll never forget.
Oh my God. Yeah.
They definitely are giving that kid trauma with that name.
Yeah, like imagine your absolute worst enemy in the whole world, and you name your child after them.
Oh man, that's
terrible. See, authors make mistakes too, everyone.
It's okay.
It happens.
Maybe I will ask Brittany of the Sarah Maclean Murder Wall if she would like to make me like a book of like data, but then I have to promise that I would look at it, and honestly, I'm not sure I would. So.
That's true. Maybe maybe like a graphic that you could do as like a pre-order giveaway thing.
Oh, fun. Yeah. names never to use. I just need I need a page that says that.
Like a family tree type
Yeah.
graphic thing. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
That's great.
All those names, every name in the whole world available to me.
It's bound to happen. You can't be the only author that's managed to do that. I feel like
I'm sure.
I'm sure.
Many have made the same mistake. I'm positive.
Well, I'm always fascinated by people like Nora Roberts, right? Has written 260 books or something.
Yeah.
I mean, has she never repeated a name? Because I'm running out of ideas.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm only 18 in. So.
Yeah, I wonder if she has to have repeated
She's
a
got
name.
to have repeated names. I mean, I don't know.
Like it just has to be.
That's wild.
The case.
So
now I feel like I need to go see if there's a list.
I'm sure somebody has done that.
Just so I can be like, somehow you've not repeated.
Right.
Or is, the same one over and over. Let's see. Okay, so I wanted to talk some about your female characters and what draws you, like where you're drawing inspiration for them. Because they're always such strong characters, even if they're dealing with like terrible things or, figuring life out still. But I just wondered where you get your inspiration for it from. Like if they're particular people or if it's just in general.
Everyone. It's the whole world. These days, throw a stone, hit a strong woman, right? I feel like look, my books turned a corner in 2016. And I think, and I really do think if you look at my books as a continuum, there's it's not like I woke up the morning after the election and was a totally different person. But I think I woke up the morning after that election and I was like on fire in some way. And so then it just became all the little bits of Maclean that were in the first, 7 books or longer, 8 books, suddenly activated in a different way. And I just had more to say. And I think the reason why I had more to say is because I looked around me and I was so inspired by all the other people in my life who also had more to say. And when I say people in my life, I include readers. I include people who are my mutuals on Twitter, like you. I feel like it's other writers, it's activists, it's politicians, it's, my kids' teachers, it's my kid, right? Suddenly there's just every person I meet who is inspiring. I think this is true for all writers, right? You're inspired by every person you meet in some way. Every conversation is potentially a book, right? And but I mean, I can't understand how people aren't writing women who are backed against the wall now and have to figure out how to act. I think that is a thing that is happening right now in romance, and I just don't understand how that's possible. Which is, maybe it's just the way we're all built, right?
Yeah.
And it's a lot of, I think when the world just sort of started to burn, it feels like it's been burning for a long time, but it felt like a lot of readers turned to softness. They turned to wanting to read softer, kinder, gentler books, and that's totally great in the market, in the genre gave that to them.
Yeah.
And many of us, I think, also turned in the exact opposite direction, and we were give us Milla Vane, and give us intense heroines who are doing intense things. Give us Adriana Herrera, give us people who are we went back. I don't think that it's any surprise that Fated Mates started reading Cressley, doing a full reread of Cressley Cole in the wake of that 2016 election, because it just felt like we just wanted heroines who, when backed against the wall, fight.
Yeah. I can see that for sure.
I really think the genre split in that moment.
It's interesting because I think I can see both of those things happening, and I think I pick up both of those types of romance, but yeah, you're not wrong, and I think the soft, I wonder too if some of the softer, more escapist stuff is sort of where all the monster romance is coming from.
It
1,000%,
is,
right?
100%. Yeah, I agree.
There's that like what was paranormal, right? Post 9/11. I'm gonna be a little nerdy with you guys, but like post 9/11, right? Like was the rise of that like intense paranormal, like J.R. Ward was writing those like her like wacky Black Dagger Brotherhood. I mean, it's not wacky, it's so intense though. Like those guys are dialed up to 15. And then Cressley was writing like all of her Valkyries and like IAD, and Nalini was writing these like big paranormal like world ending things. And now monster romance is so soft and like lovely, right? But like I think about that Minotaur romance, like Morning Glory Milking Farm, right? Which I love. Like the best small town romance I've read, the best contemporary, like soft contemporary I've read in a long time. But like so soft. And like gentle and kind, and what a decent dude. And like there was just so much to love about that whole world. And I do think this monster romance is like about finding softness in like this
unexpected places,
unpleasant time in some way,
well, I mean,
right?
it's like we're living in what's like feels apocalyptic in a lot of ways, and so it's like, how do you find kindness and coziness and love and stuff in the middle of that?
I've also seen comments on it about how like the monster isn't going to judge you for the human things about your body, like stretch marks or different things, because they don't have the same beauty standards, and then how they're also like generally concerned about taking up too much space or hurting you in a way that like we often maybe don't get in human man.
Well, it's like also a pushback on some of the like toxic masculinity stuff we have happening.
That this like, giant, you know, Minotaur is like the gentlest lover.
Right.
I mean,
so like
rock your world
this is the thing, right? Like, is there's like, it feels like there are two kinds of romance going on right now. There's the, we want to see the toxic, or not toxic, but we want to see like the patriarchy like embedded into men broken and like broken down, and we want to see like a hero suffer, which is like, that's the root of romance, right? Like we've been loving heroes suffering for 50 years. Or we want to see these like heroes who are already suffering, like at the start, right? Like they've already had all of that toxic masculinity, like you said, Bethany, like broken, and now they see that it pains them, and so we can like there are different books, they are telling different stories.
It's so interesting. So one thing we were talking about is with your romance, you write these historicals that still have kind of a modern feel or vibe to them. And so could you talk about kind of what draws you to write romance in kind of that way, in that category?
Like I said, I think historical for me is really about fantasy, right? It's about being able to really distill a world into like the very clear setting that I am interested in writing, right? I love writing historicals because I like that the boundaries of the world are very rigid, right? So like we all understand when we come to historical what can and cannot be done in this world. It's a little like writing magic, right? Except I don't have to invent the rules of the world. Like, you know, when you think about like what Sarah J. Maas is doing, right? Like she's invented this world. There are rules to the world. There are boundaries to the world. You spend many, many books in these series, like learning the rules of this world and understanding the world building. In historicals, I don't have to spend as much time. I do still have to obviously world build for you, but like you understand that like if these two get caught, like, you know, boning in a garden, somebody's going to be like, they have to get married. Right. So like there's like it's a little, whereas in contemporary, if these two get caught boning in a garden, like maybe it gets on Instagram, like, and that's a little bit of a drama, but like no one's going to be like, you must marry my daughter.
Right.
Unless you're in a mafia romance, and that's like also a fantasy world. Right. So I think So I think there's something really, for me, there's something very freeing about being able to like untether from contemporary, from like the sort of wide, almost like no rules world of contemporary, of the contemporary United States, say, and still like retain those modern sensibilities, which are not super modern. Like Lizzie Bennett still speaks to us all because Lizzie Bennett talks like a I mean, she sounds like our friends, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know that. I mean, I have a lot of questions about like what is and
isn't
a modern
historical.
sensibility.
Yeah.
However, I will appreciate that like Imogen creating a like inventing a glitter bomb is pretty modern, right? Like so I think that for me, it's about like, I want historicals to feel really, really fun because when I started reading romance and started reading historicals, they felt really, really fun. Like we meet historical romance heroines in the 1980s, like, you know, captaining their own pirate ship, shooting radishes at cockroaches, like, you know, like being just crazy and like fun. And I want that. Like, I miss that. I loved every one of those books because it made me feel like they could take me away. Those heroines were strong and badass and like could take me away. And I still feel like that's the value of historical today.
Yeah.
But when you write a book in 2022 about 1842, you're writing for readers in 2022. And I think the perception of like the critique of they feel so modern, like I think it's supposed to be insulting to me, and it's really not.
I mean, it's a compliment here.
Yeah.
Well, you know, like as you're talking, the thing that occurs to me is I you know, I know in other mediums there is sometimes this sort of idealization of this imagined past that never really existed in like the 50s or something. And so part of me wonders if there is a subset of historical romance readers that are doing the same thing, where it's they want this imagined past where like gender roles are very specific and things are like constrained in a certain way when that never maybe really existed the way they think it does. But I do wonder if like that's some of where the pushback can come from.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think that readers who feel that way need to interrogate sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia. I mean, like, and I'm not calling those people sexist, racist, homophobic, and transphobic, but I'm saying like, hey, maybe there's some internalized shit for us to like all unpack together.
Yes.
I mean, let's also be real. We'd all be dead if we were alive then. It's fine.
Oh, I mean,
I would not survive. It's fine.
No.
Would not have survived.
And it was not great. Like, listen, it was, you know, I think a lot about like, as much as we say like, oh, everything's terrible, like we are still we are still marching forward. Right? Many of us, I mean, with the exception of people with uteruses in America right now, are better off and have more rights now than we did in the 1840s. Women could have abortions in the 1840s, just FYI.
Yes. So. Yeah. But I mean, and I think there's a reason that like I hear from a lot of friends who are readers who are, you know, Black or people of color who are like, I am careful, like don't want to read as many historicals, or I wouldn't want to go back and live in the past because like there's no place where that is a positive thing, you know. So yeah, I think there's a lot of which I appreciate that there are more writers now who are writing historicals and thinking about some of those realities. I like Adrienne Herrera, who we've had on here before, and she's great.
Well, Adriana has probably talked to you about how she would not like. She says all the time that she has no interest in writing historicals prior to, you know, abolition.
Yeah,
and like global abolition across the United Kingdom and all the colonies, and I think that's a very understandable and real way of like, you know, setting boundaries. I think that the work of writers like me, aside from, my God, you guys, we have to lift up these own voices, or we have to lift up authors who are writing their own stories in these time periods.
Yeah.
But our work also is to tell the truth about the time we are writing in, which is, you know, BIPOC people existed. They lived happily. Queer people existed. They lived happily. Trauma is not the only story to be told about these people.
Yeah.
You know, trans people existed and lived happily. So I think that is our work. That is the failure of historical romance over the last 50 years that has been so predominantly cis, het, white.
Yep.
And it came from a very particular gaze. And I think we are doing better, but we are not doing great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like better is a long continuum.
Yeah.
Through the lens of history.
Totally.
Yeah. So I know we have like limited time. Izzy, I don't know what you want to go for.
I think the spicy. We should ask the spicy.
Okay, all right.
That's always fun. I feel like. So you write spicy scenes in your books. I like asking this question of romance authors always because I feel like it's always interesting the response.
And it's a crowd pleaser.
Yeah. How do you approach writing your sexy scenes and your spicy scenes in your books? Is it hard? Do you
They are
they
are the most difficult scenes that I write. It could take me to give you a frame of reference. I could write a chapter in a day of like a normal whatever. I write a long chapter, like I could write 20 pages in a day without any trouble of any other part of the book, but it can take me a week to write a sex scene. And that's not just because in Heartbreaker there's a 4-chapter sex scene. Although that is a real thing. I think sex is really challenging for me because it has to do a lot of like narrative work. It does a lot of character work in my books. Often it relates to the plot in some way. It complicates everything. Sophie Jordan, my like closest friend in the world, likes to say that sex should make everything worse always. And I think that that's really true. Like I think in a romance novel, that's the job of sex, and whatever worse means in the context of the book. But it's interesting because also because I don't want it to be boring. Like I don't want it to feel like, oh, this is just like, here we go, like another Maclean sex scene. Like every time I write one, I'm like, all right, well, how do we do this in a way that's like relevant to the characters and feels correct and feels like how the characters would do it. In Heartbreaker, a lot of people are responding to it very positively in a lot of ways, but I am hearing over and over again, like, this is your hottest book, which is very surprising to me because I didn't actually think that it was my hottest book. But Claiborne has a real like daddy vibe. So
he does.
He does.
There's like some praise kink in there. Although
I saw you lead into the current trend of praise kink, and I was like, ooh.
I don't know that I thought of it as a trend situation, but it is on trend. How about that? And
it is on trend.
And listen, I saw somebody yesterday tweet, I forget who it was, I wish I could call them out, that they didn't think praise kink should be considered a kink because it shouldn't be kink, like a kink to have somebody like tell you that you're doing great. And I was like, you know what? I support that as a way.
I mean,
I think it's got to be the opposite. You know, we have to have the opposite thing to the degradation.
I guess so. I guess so. Well, also, I guess there are probably people who have like a stronger reaction to praise than others. Like it should be fine for everybody, but like
deeply uncomfortable with praise. So,
so for you, it is a kink.
Yeah, it would be then because I'd be like, no, any other time. Like, absolutely not. But I'll read it and I'm like, this is great.
That's amazing. So we like to do a thing where we talk about recent and upcoming book releases that are on our radar. So we thought it would be great if you have anything that you want to share that you think people should be aware of, and we'll give you a minute to think because we have a couple.
I'm looking around my like. I will not show you my office, but it is literally piles of books. Well, you can see this.
We can relate. I mean, this is like what we do.
All over.
I was like, do you really think what's around me is not dissimilar right now?
Right.
I didn't just bring up like my stack of books I got in the mail yesterday and set them on a bookshelf and say, you'll go up later.
Yeah. So I know the ones and you anything recent or upcoming you want to talk about is great. The ones we're going to talk about are released, I think, mostly between September 6th and September 19th, 2022.
Okay.
And so the first one, I haven't read this yet, but I'm excited about it, is The Holiday Trap by Roane Parish, which is a contemporary, it's a contemporary romance that's like a queer take on the holiday film. Like where people like swap, which I think will be adorable. So I'm very excited to pick that one up. It's coming out September 6th. Izzy.
Yes, I've got Angelica Frankenstein Makes Her Match by Sally Thorne.
It's so weird and good.
I'm very hopeful. As someone
you haven't read it yet?
No, not yet. I'm very excited.
Weird, you guys. Can I swear? I've sworn a couple of times.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
But this is about Angelica making her match in the lab, and I just it sounds weird, and I was just like, I'm in. I am very in. Because I like Sally Thorne's writing, didn't love the Hating Game, but I'm excited to try this because I feel like it seems right up my alley.
So here's what I'm going to say. I'm sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you and tell you all about it. Like, so here's the thing. If you didn't love the Hating Game, I actually think this might be like your full, like it might scratch the perfect itch for you because it is the opposite of the, like it is so, okay. Here's what I want. Here's all I want in the whole world is for Sally to just keep writing just like whatever pops into her brain. Right. Because this book, so yeah, Angelica Frankenstein is Dr. Frankenstein's sister. And it begins with her and Dr. Frankenstein going to the morgue to like get the bodies for both his creature. And she too is going to build herself a mate.
I love this.
But like through the course of chapter 1, this is not a spoiler in any way. Through the course of chapter 1, it becomes clear that she's tried to do this several times before to no avail.
Oh, no.
And then like if it has not gone well when they've run the electricity through them.
Oh no.
And like it is so bananas. And so you're laugh out loud funny. And then at the end of like the first chapter, they awaken this creature that she's built of like, multiple parts. And he's like a sentient being for the first time ever. Like they've never had one like actually like wake up with thoughts and like verbal, like being able to verbalize.
Yeah.
And it is so weird and also like freaking delightful. It's so funny. Like Sally is one of the funniest, right? Like all this discussion of like what is a rom-com, like Sally is without question one of the greatest rom-com writers of a generation. And it's so weird. And like, but like my thing is like, I've just given you the first chapter. If that sounds at all enticing, this is the book for you. If it sounds like it's like, oh God, I don't know, it may not be the book for you.
See, when I was reading it, everything I've heard, I was like, I didn't know I wanted this, but I've always wanted this Frankenstein romance.
And the whole time, and for me, like a romance really is about not being able to see how it's going to end. Right? Like, how is she going to pull this off? And there's so much weird stuff about this. Like, who was this man? He has a brain and a past life. Like, what happens? Like, you've woken him up. He died of something. Like, there's so many questions that have to be answered in order for happily ever after to be achieved. Yeah. And also, this one is for the like unlikable heroine crew, because at the very beginning, like, you know what? Angelica's like not the greatest. You're sort of like, do I like this person? By the end, she's like, I would die for her. And the whole thing is just, it's such a treat.
I love an unlikable heroine. So
I'm very excited.
Sounds amazing.
Extra excited now.
That's
Me
great.
too. I'm going to go with, Eva Moore has a book out called Coming. Actually, I think it might be this week. It's the 30th. It comes out August 30th.
Okay.
And it's called Caught a Vibe. and it's a romance that like tackles COVID as a like concept. And I'm really excited about it. I haven't read it yet. And what I'm excited about is like romance seems to have kind of like avoided this as a theme. And I can totally understand why a lot of people are avoiding it. But basically they're like it's like two people who like they had a one-night stand and they are like through a confluence of romance reasons forced to quarantine together because they get COVID. Or I don't know if they get COVID or I don't know. But they do quarantine together because I haven't read the book.
Okay.
It's called Caught a Vibe. And I'm like kind of into it. She's a sex toy designer. He's like a tech writer. And they are like forced to quarantine together as like basically strangers.
That sounds kind of amazing.
Yeah. And I'm sort of like, I feel like now 2.5 years later, I'm ready for this.
Yeah.
And so I'm really looking forward to reading it.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, that one sounds fun.
Yeah. Okay, so quickly, like the two others coming out soon, I'm really excited for. September 6th, we're also getting The Sunbearer Trials by Aidan Thomas, which is his first YA fantasy with he's a trans Latinx author, and it looks really fun. So it's got like trials elements, it's got a queer romance, a trans main character. I've really enjoyed the other two books that Aidan has written, and so I think this one is going to be good. And then so excited, September 13th for Nona the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, because I'm obsessed with that entire series, which is like either for you or not for you. I feel like people fall very strongly one way or another, but I think Tamsin is a brilliant experimental writer, and it's like horror, sci-fi, lesbian necromancers, and it's great. So I'm very excited for book 3.
Okay, and then on September 13th, we also have The Makeup Test by Jenny L. Howe, which is two PhD students are TAing for the same teacher, and they're rivals. And it sounds like they're battling it out for the last spot to fill a research trip.
Nice.
So that sounds like a fun enemies
like
to lovers.
If Allie Hazelwood wrote The Hating Game.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like, kind of.
But with, I think, a plus-size heroine.
It looks
fun.
Yeah. Plus size on the cover. So fingers crossed that's true.
Yeah.
It sounded like it in the description, so.
Awesome.
Very exciting.
So my next pick is Adriana. It's just like an Adriana day for us. Adriana's On the Hustle.
Yes.
Which is out October 11th. And the heroine is, I have this on my Kindle, and it is actually my next read. But the heroine is a Instagram, like she does, or not Instagram, she does book themed makeovers, like bedroom makeovers for her friends. So like, which I think is like, listen, I love a heroine with a crazy job. And I love this idea. So basically they're like, I want a Game of Thrones bedroom. And so like, she like helps them like figure out what the bed would look like and how like the walls would be. And then, but that's not like, that's the job she wants to like make her job, but to like pay the bills, she is the assistant to a former Olympic swimmer and heir to a real estate empire, because obviously,
of course.
And he's the worst, and he like asks her, like he's constantly making these like terrible demands, and she just finally quits. She gets like an opportunity and she quits, and he's like, and this is my favorite trope ever, is like assistant quits because she's tired of her like hot boss being a jerk, and then he's like, he just melts down. And then he like chases her to Dallas.
I love it.
To like win her back.
Oh, that's amazing. I always love Adriana's books. So
and I, like I said, I haven't read this one yet, but I'm sure it's super hot because it has to be.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no way it's not.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Amazing. So everything will be linked in show notes and video description for anybody looking for any of these books. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. It's been so much fun to talk. Yeah. Thanks. This has been really great. If you enjoy the podcast, we'd appreciate if you take a minute to rate and review us. And if you're interested in getting early access to bonus and exclusive bonus content, consider supporting us on Patreon. And huge thanks to all of our supporting patrons who make this possible. We'll be back in 2 weeks. I'll be back with Leanna to talk about A Little Hatred by Joe Abercrombie, continuing with the read-along we're doing. And you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Chapter 3 Podcast, and find us on our individual YouTube channels. Next episode will be up in 2 weeks, and this episode's bonus content will be available to patrons in the next few days. Thanks for listening.
Yay.